Hi, it's Louise here from the Digital PR podcast. We have something new for you this season, not just a new season of podcast episodes, but mini episodes as well. The guests are all from our very own digital PR team at Propellernet, and we're just going to have quick little chats about the topics that are interesting us at the moment. Hope you enjoy.
So I'm excited to be joined by Propellernet's own creative director, Richard Paul. Thank you very much for joining us. Always good to see you. Let's start with, because I'm very familiar with it, but our listeners won't be. Tell us a little bit about your career so far, how you ended up in your current role, your journey.
So quite a weird way into it. I actually did script writing at university. So at that time of my life, I was thinking I'd be writing Oscar-winning screenplays and stuff like that, but came out of it unable to be able to do unpaid internships and stuff like that. So I needed a job basically, and wanted to stay in writing, wanted to stay in something creative. I got a role at an SEO agency in the Midlands, which are very few and far between. And from that, I mean, at that point, I was just writing SEO copy for various websites at that time. So I was looking for something that was a bit more involved from a marketing point of view, and also wanted to leave the little town of Rugby that I lived in. So it was kind of a bit of a toss up really between. I was looking at moving to London, but then saw this job which was writing and doing marketing for a stag and hen organisation in Brighton. And as a early 20s person, seemed like an ideal job. Like move down to the coast, do that. Like seemed like a fun company. So moved down to do that role, and that's where like I firstly got into, I guess, digital PR or just PR in general. I had a great PR manager there, and it just did some cool campaigns with them. They were very like obviously being a stag and hen company, like up for doing anything really. So yeah, just kind of got into it through that, like a bit of a weird way into it. And then following that role, worked at a few other places, like worked in sports for a little while. So worked with teams like Man United, Liverpool, that was really cool. And then went into the agency world, so a couple of different agencies before moving to Propellernet, and I've been here a good while now. And yeah, through that, I guess like that's been the main bulk of my career, where I have really worked on a lot of creative stuff, and like, a lot more around like the ideation side of things. So yeah, this role of creative director is now coming up to a year, which feels crazy because it actually like still feels quite a new role for me, but it has been, yeah, coming up to a year's time. But yeah, a roundabout journey into it. But throughout all of it, I guess from the script writing to now, like creativity has been a huge part of that. It's something I've wanted to maintain throughout my career.
I believe it's been a year since you've had that role. It flies past, doesn't it? And as you said, yeah, I'd forgotten that you studied script writing. So like creativity has always kind of been of interest to you. We hear in the sort of the SEO world, digital PR world, I think it's probably fair to say we do hear about creativity, but we hear probably a lot more about, data and relevancy and DA and like numbers and things like that. So why do you think so many creative people kind of choose digital PR as a career path?
That's a good question. I think like myself, a lot of people are drawn to it because all of those numbers, like the DA, link numbers, the ranking changes, all of that is, especially now, it's like underpinned by creativity. I think like none of that exists without creativity, basically. Like to be able to place a story, get a good link, you need a creative idea that's backing it up. So I think a lot of people are drawn to it simply by that, basically, because yeah, aside from the analytical side of it, it's about telling good stories, isn't it? So I think that's a major draw for a lot of people.
That's true. You've actually done a lot of work on our processes in terms of how to come up with the best creative ideas. So what kind of part of that process do you think creativity can really shine? Because there's a lot of elements to it. It's not just blank piece of paper and like come up with ideas. Like where do you think creativity really can shine?
It's a tough one because I think like the easy option is to say like in the ideation or like the execution of it, when it's like if you're doing like a photo shoot or a video piece or something like that. That's where the creativity really flies. But I actually think like it's every single part of the journey when it comes to digital PR and like getting a story out there. Because I think even right down to a subject line, or a lot of what we have in the industry, a lot of people talk about it is like re-angling a story that maybe isn't performing. And again, I just think there's tons of creativity there in thinking of a way to take something that maybe isn't doing as well and repurposing it and making it work well. Like that's a really hard thing to do and needs lots of creativity. And I just think like the rise of reactive work as well is true for that too. Like it can be the most simple, doesn't require like a big budget type story, but it's really creative. So I actually think that at every point of creating a story and doing the work and getting journalists to cover something, there's creativity there. So I think all along the way, I can pick like just one part out.
No, I totally agree. I think you're right. There's like creativity. There's a lot of creativity in like coming up with the right subject line and like the right email and the right angle and rise of reactive, all that kind of stuff. So it really does sort of play a part the whole way along and can often be, I think, undervalued because we're so, in our industry, we're kind of obsessed with like processes or shortcuts or like this is the right way to do things. And actually like finding a new creative way of doing something is more interesting and can really help things or elevate stories, campaigns, etc. Creativity can be difficult though. We've all been there where you're asked to come up with ideas for a client and you're really sort of struggling with it. Or a campaign's not going well and you're really struggling with how to inject new life into it. What would be your advice as a man of many years of experience now? How would you advise someone who's sort of struggling with like a creative block of some sort? What would you do?
A few different things. I think like a few of these that I tend to use, like I've spoken about a fair amount, but maybe some not so much. But like, yeah, I definitely experience blocks and do find like drawing from a variety of things can help. Like one I always find to be helpful is just getting outside and getting away from your desk. Definitely previously in my career, in the early days, especially, you just feel that you need to constantly be tied to your desk, especially because you've got Slack notifications working from home. You feel you need to always be present. But there's totally nothing wrong in going for a walk if you need to come up with ideas or something like that, just taking yourself away from your desk from those Slack notifications, because I think they can be real creative blockers in themselves if you just start thinking about something and then if you've got someone slacking you about this thing that you just don't need at the time, like that can really ruin it. So I just think like I can often find like if you just I go for a walk, I come back and I've thought of things and my head's in a better place to think of ideas. So that's like first and foremost, I'd do that. Alongside that as well, I just think, especially for I guess PR just in general, it's just one consuming the news and just like consuming other media. Again, it might feel bad to someone that's new, that's kind of early in their role, feel like you shouldn't be doing this stuff, but just going on TikTok, scrolling about Twitter and things like that, just to get your head in like what is going on in the world. Because I think then like the best ideas generally are, especially reactive, are off the back of things that are happening. So you're never, or it's going to be really hard to come up with ideas if you're not consuming that. So I think just spending some time. I mean, some of the ideas I've come up with has just been sat watching TV. I'm not saying just like turn on the TV in your working day, but just consuming stuff can massively help. And same again, just like going on Reddit and looking around like the subjects you've got to ideate around. All of that stuff can just really help. Like doing that before going for a walk or something can help. And then there's just a couple of other things I tend to do. One of which has been more recent, which is just thinking about if I'm landed with a brief that maybe just doesn't feel. One thing that springs to mind is say there's a brief where you had to come up with ideas for the target audience is over 50s or something like that. And I've not experienced that. I'm not an over 50. So obvious ways you can get your head in that space, but one for me is just to think of people that you know generally in your life and know quite well and what their interests are, what they like to do, and just try and put yourself in their shoes a little bit. Just think about my parents. I'm like, what do they like? Like, what are they interested in? Like, what do their friends like? What do they want to do? And just that can just help take your mind in another direction. It could be, you could take anything and be like, you'll probably know a person who likes that thing or does that thing. It's a hobby of theirs or something like that. And just thinking about what that person does, I think can throw up at least some good starting points. And then just one final thing, I just think everyone should do it is just any idea they come up with, note it down in a document. Even if it's just like a scrapbook or something. I've just got like this Word doc where I just bullet point every idea I've come up with for every client or just general little thoughts. And if you're then in a block, just revisiting that when your head has obviously been in a good creative space I think can just help to get you back there, because there might have just been some ideas which at the time didn't sound any good, but then just revisiting those and being like, oh, actually, this little spin on it
Yeah.
could work. So yeah, I'd start with all of those things, and hopefully one of those will help.
Yeah, some sound advice there. I do the Word doc thing as well, and actually revisiting it is quite an amusing, because it's actually been going on for about 4 years, and some of the thoughts are like, wow.
Yeah, some of it
But
is
yeah,
pretty terrible, but there should be some nuggets in there.
yeah,
Just
for
hope.
sure, for sure. Let's talk about trash talk, because
Oh,
we we talk about it a bit as a team. We talk about it when just the two of us chat, and like we're both on social media, etc. And there's, in terms of digital PR stories, campaigns, etc., there's been a lot of talk or criticism of like rinse and repeat formulas, campaigns that are irrelevant to the brand, like tasteless or kind of, let's say, morally questionable kind of subject matter. What do you kind of make of that, and what do you predict for the future of creativity and digital PR? Because it's kind of gone, like,
yeah.
it flows quite a lot, doesn't it? It's all been about big campaigns, then it's reactive, then like, yeah. What do you see? I'm going to stop
Yeah.
waffling.
I feel two ways about it. I think on one side of it, I think sometimes, like obviously we're talking about sometimes Twitter drama and stuff like that, and it can get a bit much at times. It always feels like there's something, doesn't there? It's like a couple of weeks will go by and then there's a new thing, and it's like bloody hell. Some people just need to calm down a little bit. But at the same time, I think it's not a bad thing. Like there's sometimes I'm like, this is actually quite good, like that this work's being called out, especially when it's like something that's really irrelevant or actually quite offensive or just not in good taste or something like that. I think it's right for that to be called out. And I think generally that just will, in the long run, make for a better industry, because it's like it's good that these things, in a sense, are being held to account and it's been pointed out, especially to like junior people that are joining the industry, that this just isn't, because you're right. You said it earlier. There's formats and things like that digital PR tends to lean on a little bit, and it's good it's getting pointed out, because I think it just pushes us all to try and do better. I think you do see that a lot. Like people are like ourselves as well. You're just pushing to do better work all the time. You don't want to kind of be tarred with the same brush of potentially other people that are putting out this bad work. You want to stand aside from that. So the only way to do that is to do better work. So I think that is what is happening and is going to continue to happen in the industry. I think as one side of it, that is an interesting one, like of why this has potentially happened in digital PR, because it's something that obviously, looking online, it feels very particular to digital PR. It's not a maybe traditional PR thing, and I think some of it comes down to budget. It's of like the budgets that are there sometimes from clients for digital PR work versus traditional PR work haven't always been the same. So you do maybe lean on particular formats, but again, I think that is slowly changing as more and more brands do realize how effective digital PR work can be. So again, I just think in the future the work's just going to get better for it, really.
Yeah, a very positive message and way of looking at it, and would agree the budget thing is a really good point as well, because we know that we've been asked sometimes to be like, hey, can you do a digital PR campaign? There's like no third party budget, there's like nothing available, and that's really tricky, because then you're quite limited on sort of
Yeah.
what you can create, which is why I think we see certain formats kind of get rinsed, and certain ways of doing things, or things that maybe are a bit rushed and not thought through. So hopefully that does change over time, because digital PR, as we know, done well, can do two jobs. It can get those links to improve SEO performance, and can also raise brand awareness in exactly the right way. So I think that's a really positive message for the future. We delved inside your mind with your thoughts on a lot of things. I am keen to hear, very interested actually, how you're going to answer this one. What has been your favorite creative campaign this year? And I think, you're entitled to pick one of yours or ours, like, but if you do, then you've got to pick one outside of ours as well.
I'll pick one from outside. I think there's been tons. It's one that comes to mind. I won't choose this as the actual one, but one that does come to mind is the sausage finger veil pens for around the coronation. I thought that,
Yeah.
that was pretty hilarious. Although, yeah, I won't pick that as the number one. One that did really stand out, it was good inspiration, is the Beavertown oil for your neck. Obviously, I do neck oil beer. It was like the sun cream because it was shining a light on the fact that people, when they're out in beer gardens or just generally people aren't wearing sun cream, is a really important thing. And I just thought it was such a cool campaign for a brand like that. Like obviously a lot of people love drinking their beer. It just made so much sense. Like a nice little pun in the name. Yeah, it was just great. And I genuinely just really like campaigns that actually like stand for something or just point something out that is genuinely helpful in
Mm.
some way. And yes, I really like that one. I just thought it was a good message to be sending out. Great timing for it. Got a good amount of coverage. Yeah.
I'd agree. I thought it's a good one. They're quite clever with their marketing, like contrast to like someone like Brewdog, who do a lot of like,
Yeah.
sort of beers around events and things like that, and have been quite criticized for doing that as a format. But Beavertown have obviously thought quite hard about, problem, and they're right. Especially if you get drunk, you forget to put on suntan cream. Although, ironically, they've done it in the summer where we haven't had. I mean,
No,
yeah, a bit of a
no.
heat wave now, but it's probably not been that needed, has it? So
Probably
yeah,
weren't too happy about the weather, but I think they got their coverage and got away with it. But yeah, you're so right about the Brewdog thing as well, because I think they, not to bash anybody, but there tends to be a lot of new beers that'll come out. Anything happens, there's a new beer. People kind of roll their eyes at it. Whereas this, it was just, I don't know, it felt a little bit more unusual, and it was actually just, yeah, a bit more interesting, I think, as a campaign. So
yeah,
yeah, it's really
true,
nice.
true. Final question, which is sort of an additional question that
Mm.
I'm just quite intrigued by. You mentioned about like coming up with ideas in front of the TV, like when you like consuming things. Where do you think you come up with your best ideas? I've often asked people this, and I had a colleague once who was like, "Oh, it's always in the shower." And I was like, "Oh, that's quite interesting." Like, I guess because your mind's just it's got time to think, but could you pinpoint where you come up with your best work?
Yeah, and exactly the same. Like in the shower, brushing my teeth. Like exactly the same for me. I don't know what it is. I tend to like if I know I've got a brief in a few days' time or something, I'll use like the mornings when I'm getting ready to as a lot of thinking time. So just somehow, just things tend to come up, and then I just note it
Mm.
down on my phone. So yeah, shower, great place for ideas, I think.
You
What
don't have
about
like a
you?
what? You don't have a whiteboard or anything in the shower, frantically scribbling on it.
Yeah. I don't. I don't know. Yeah, just my phone notes are great. Or like I just slack myself it actually. That's what I do because I just slack my phone. But yeah, the shower. What about yourself, Steve?
Annoyingly, and it is actually quite annoying, it's in two places which aren't really particularly easy to like note down ideas. So it's when I'm driving. So like stuff will just pop into my head when I'm driving. So I've got to that level. I passed my driving test fairly late. I've got to that level now of driving comfort where it's all a bit automatic. So I'm thinking of ideas, but like it's nigh on impossible. So it's like I then get stressed trying to remember the idea
Yeah.
because I don't want to be using my phone whilst driving. And then it's that little bit, that bit between being fully awake and or that like half sleep bit where you're like nodding off. It's like the brain's
Yes.
sort of just
Yeah.
slightly working in a different way. And obviously not every night, but if I'm in the midst of kind of creating ideas for a client, like more often than not, something will pop into my head. So I've got a little notebook by my bed,
Oh,
which has
nice.
like little scrawls in it of like, oh, we could, I don't know, do the golden ratio of dogs or something, which actually we did do, but
But
something
yeah.
akin to that. But yeah, I was just quite intrigued because you mentioned it before. I wanted to pick up on it. That's been great. Thank you very much. Really interesting to delve into your thoughts, your tips, advice on all manner of things. So Richard Paul, our creative director, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, mate. Thanks a lot. Lovely.